she said, Cheryl, what's your fear? I said, I really want to fit in, but I feel uncomfortable. She said, this is why we chose you. You're raised Western, mainland. Squeaky wheel gets the grease. Women here, the quacking duck gets shot. I was interviewing a lot of people coming out of the military, and I saw a number of things happening with everybody. And that was they were wildly unprepared. They didn't really know what they wanted. They could not negotiate a salary. They did not know what their worth was. And really, I felt that they were sort of aimless. I'm a connector. This is how I see life. You need to talk to somebody and I have a route to get to them. I will move mountains to do it, for sure. And I feel like, in a way, this is sort of one of the reasons I've gone this way professionally. ADHD, I really struggled with it. When my mother died, she was undiagnosed ADHD. My sister is a physician, so I can talk to her about the stuff that I'm learning about myself, that I see in her. And it gives me more compassion. Like, I know now why Mother was late. Her time continuum was different. Be a woman with no regrets and live a life that's full and clear your crap out. Help others. I don't necessarily need to be actively mentoring or sponsoring or championing for other women or men or those who don't identify as either. I just need to do it for myself because I want to go to bed at night feeling peace. And when I depart this world, I want to know that the work I did was valuable.
Greater Good Radio, connect, learn, heal, and grow, is brought to you by Brain Gain Hawaii, a boutique executive recruiting, career development, and coaching firm. Learn more at braingainhi.com. Welcome to Greater Good Radio. Today's guest is Cheryl Cross. Welcome to the show, Cheryl.
What an honor. I've been a fan of yours we were just talking before we hit the record button, 7 years? And we sort of circled around each other in our work, but now I get to be in your home and see this beautiful studio, and it's just an honor. Thank you so much for inviting me. Finally, we've been trying to put this together for how long?
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming.
Sure.
So for folks that aren't familiar with you, how would you introduce yourself?
I actually train this to people and corporations. It's the present, past, future technique. And I learned this technique from a friend, Andrea Wojnicki, who is a talk-to-talk doctor. She's a doctor of communication up in Canada. So this is a great technique for you or anybody who wants to remember on the spot how to introduce themselves. And that is, presently, I am Cheryl Cross. I am a podcaster, author. I'm an independent consultant in the HR world. I was a corporate recruiter for the DoD for a management consulting firm here in Hawaii, which is why I'm here. I've also owned my own small business, which I've restarted. And I'm just really looking forward to learning about you, Evan, and talking about all the things I'm doing. See?
So who is the Cheryl Cross behind all of that, though? That's a lot of what you do. Mm-hmm. So how would you introduce yourself for who you are?
That's a good question because that's on my list of things to work on. How work is not your identity, but I do want to say that it's more of a blend of what I am because my personal goals are definitely in the book. Like writing the book was a personal goal of mine since I was a little kid. And yes, that's who I am. To be able to say I'm an author now is 100% Cheryl Cross. Like I've always wanted to say I'm a professional writer or I'm an author or podcaster, which is new because I'm a former broadcaster. Mm-hmm. Is that who I am? I think so. I think it's a lot of my identity and how I show up in the world for sure.
So this book, Civilian Mission, the 3-year guide for military professionals planning civilian careers. Mm-hmm. What's the genesis of this?
Well, you know this, being a recruiter, you hear a lot of the same things over and over. And I was working for a wonderful big management consulting firm that serves the Department of Defense here in Hawaii. They're a global firm. But I was interviewing a lot of people coming out of the military, and I saw a number of things happening with everybody. And that was they were wildly unprepared for what they didn't really know what they wanted. They could not negotiate a salary. They did not know what their worth was. And really, I felt that they were sort of aimless. And coming from that sort of enculturated, institutionalized, predictive career environment and coming into this big, flexible, fungible, organic. Oh my gosh, I have no idea what this is like. Maybe I've only been preparing for a few months or a year max. They were wildly unprepared. So I thought, I'm going to write some go-tos, some white papers, some this, some that. Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam. I did a salary negotiation workshop. It was 4 hours. It was wildly successful. I gave it to them. They still kind of teach it in a way in their own training in the what's called TAPS, Transition Assistance Programs. That was the beginning of creating something. I just didn't know what it looked like. I didn't really have it in my hands. It was still sort of an elusive thing. I was talking to who is actually the writer of my foreword, Chase Hughes. He's a noted behavioral expert. And we were talking because I was trying to bring him here to show that he is the poster boy of being the great example of what you can take from the military and really make a great career. And we were just chatting, and I said, yeah, I'm kind of thinking about writing a book. I just don't really know. And, you know, there's so many guides out there about how to use your last year. And he said, I'd like to get them at year 3. And it was like, bam. All right. So if we take that year concept and push it out to 3, how might we do that? And that's where it started. And it was like fire. I could not stop thinking about, okay, what would the first year look like? What would the second year look like? What would the third? And so it all kind of came into concept for me. And sitting down and writing it was very easy. And probably, as you know, when things come naturally or easy, it's like, okay, this is meant to be. So that whole process from really deciding what it would look like to creating it was very swift and smooth. But it really came from all the people that just didn't know. And I thought, well, let's make something that's valuable for them.
Is there anything like this already in the space, or is this kind of the first piece?
I think from a recruiter's voice, it definitely is. I want to say that there's a lot of retired military folks who said, I speak to them all the time on my podcast, I've created a guide, I have a PDF, I have a this, I have a that. But in this form, no, I don't believe so. There's Transition Mission. This is a great book that's written by a vet, but it only deals with about a year. Again, it's more on the time frames and getting people to start thinking about leaving a part of themselves. I think that's what I'm learning as I talk to these folks on my podcast. They're feeling that they're kind of departing from a chunk of themselves. Not that I'm here to say you can take that chunk with you, that corporate America will completely take you and all your chunks. But I wanted it to be like, okay, year 1 of 3. Wrap your mind around this. This is what you need to start thinking about. You really need to start thinking, going from the mission, from we to me. And that was the other thing I noticed, Evan. I've heard this from several vets. If I got on stage and said me or I would get talked to, because it's not about me. It's about us. It's about the United States. It's about the mission. So going and taking that construct, which is why I called it civilian mission, you want to look at this like a mission? You're PCSing into the corporate world. Fine, let's do it that way. You know, these are the things you're going to prepare for. If you were being transferred to a new duty location and it was a wild and exquisite place, maybe not a lot of people had been there, you would probably ferret out everyone you can to talk to them, to say, hey, so I'm heading your way in 3 months, right? And I think that that's really the genesis for this, is I wanted them to be aware of the terrain that they're going into, and not the stories of, oh, it's this, you know, I heard these things from them constantly. It's the abyss. I'm jumping off a cliff. I have no idea. These vacuous terms. So what do people like you and I do? We build a bridge, right? So here's one bridge. And there's a lot of resources out there. And the podcast is another.
When I'm listening to that, kind of what stuck out to me is where you say that a chunk of them, they're being left behind. Mm-hmm. And then I have to cross this abyss and so on. Mm-hmm. That makes me think about, especially for somebody who was raised in a military family.
Were you?
And then now is in the military, and then now transitioning out, but maybe also had an unstable family situation. Mm-hmm. you're
Maybe.
losing a bit of your identity.
Mm-hmm.
The grief could be pretty enormous. You know, grief, loss, I'm leaving something behind,
Yep.
a potential I'm being abandoned.
Mm-hmm.
That could bring up other things as well. And moving into somewhere where things are not necessarily planned for you. Because typically in the military, my understanding is, you know, as you move up rank, you know what the pay is going to be. You know, kind of a general, this is the step and this is the ladder and that's the ladder you follow. It's like one ladder. And when you get out of that, that's not how it works.
Right.
So maybe you can speak to that a little bit.
Sure. Well, that's my next book, is salary. And you and I, we're salary negotiation experts, right? We know how to win for our companies, for our clients. When I learned to teach people how to win for themselves, it was like, I felt so good about that, giving people the tools. I even in my last corporate job got to say to them, look, the recruiters truly can be advocates in this way because, and you know this, Evan, when you don't pay people well, it shows on the back end. And what we mean by the back end means retention, attrition.
Yeah, they'll leave. They'll just use you as training.
And I was hiring highly skilled, highly cleared specialists. There might be 4 or 5 of them in the world.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to underpay them because that puts all of us at risk. They become then a target. And a lot of people, Evan, and we see this in corporate America. We see this through civilians. We see this through people who don't own their worth or know their worth. And that's a process. I certainly didn't.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah, it's a ton.
See, I'm talking about 2 pieces, right? You approach salary piece. The piece that I was talking about is what's happening inside on the loss and grief, right? So we can separate that out, but...
Sure. So finishing on the salary thought, you're right. You know, you walk in a military environment, you're wearing your rank on your uniform and they know the pay grades. And so there is full transparency in the military, which is amazing. Couldn't we all be this way? We're still battling that in corporate America. Thank you, state of Hawaii. You finally passed the law that job requisitions have to have this. This is one of the greatest steps we can take for pay equity. And as a workforce development councilwoman, I love this. I love seeing that because that's sort of this is sort of how we kick the undercurrent up, right? So getting to your point of, these folks feeling lost, Evan, I would have conversations with these folks. And again, these are just say the SME, the subject matter expert on whatever that is they did. And they'd have this 45-minute talk that was just like, bam, bam, they're kicking it out the park, man. You're connecting, we're rocking and rolling. And then you tell them, I told you at the beginning of our conversation, we're going to have a salary expectation talk. Are you ready? And they're like, they don't know. And for the ones that were brave enough to say, I don't know, my heart just went, ugh. Because then you turn into corporate, gatekeeper. And it's like, that's a disqualifier, for a lot of companies. Fortunately, not for me personally or for the company I was with. It's like, let's take as much time as you need for this. I can't coach you, but I can walk you to the way, or we can make another phone call, or we can just be open about this. You can go and talk to your family. So, what they needed to do over a 3-year span, they were doing in a 24-hour period, hopefully getting a hold of their spouse or significant other or mother, therapist, God, whoever, to try and figure out what it is they needed. But I found that piece to be startling, that they really didn't have these skills. And there's a big proponent, just to close the door on this, there's a big proponent of people that think that's the job of the military to teach me, and it's not. It is in their transition assistance program, TAPS. Each branch has a different name for this, by the way. But again, it's your job to advocate for yourself. It's your job to do the research on where it is you want to go, what do you want to do, and what you take with you.
So when you're talking about advocating for pay, we have a number of factors, right? One is the ability to actually do that. And then you have whether I deserve it or not, right? Whether I feel like I'm worthy, whether I feel like I have value, whether I feel like I am an imposter. You have that section of it.
Yep.
So whether they can do it and are skilled enough, that's one piece, right? But the other side is so much more powerful to me in terms of how it controls people, that I find myself talking to especially women about negotiating their pay.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time, the men always think that they're worth more, so it's different. But women is the opposite typically that I see. I mean, that's not everybody, but
It's true.
it's kind of the bulk. So what do you say to that?
When I first created my capstone training project that I ended up gifting to Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam for their TAPS class, it was called Negotiation Tactics for Women.
Oh,
Because I saw that too. And I've seen that my whole career. I've seen that as an advocate, as a mentor, as a strong woman in business. I've failed at it myself. And I don't just mean I've had trouble. I have failed at it myself. I have been tongue-tied. I have been, is it because I'm female? I don't know. But it got to the point, Evan, where I was doing, I've gone in and out of recruiting my whole career, really, well, except for the beginning. But I've gone back to recruiting when I need that, let's get, you're on a track and field team. I'm going to be a sprinter now. And that to me was that high volume kind of talking to people every day, every week, doing a lot of the same thing, repetitive stuff. I really needed that. So why did I need that? Because it's a great dopamine hit. Recruiting is one of the best reward exercises professionally I've ever done. It's a burner, but it is fun for someone who's neurodiverse, which I am, and you're constantly, my brain is constantly seeking dopamine. It's a great elixir for, it's just the rewards are so high. And it feels great. Not just the rewards, getting the dopamine and having to access it, but it feels good to do what you do. You're an integral part of building a business. You are sitting at a table where people are, you're building stuff. And I don't know if that's your experience.
When you just said it gives you that dopamine hit, it's filling some sort of core need for you.
Yeah.
What core need is it filling for
Win.
you?
It's a win. To make that placement, so in recruiting, we call things placement. When we put someone in a job or we're successful in walking someone through the process and making that match, and I call recruiters, you can be a hunter, you can do whatever. I don't know how you refer to yourself as a recruiter. I've never heard you say anything but recruiter. Yeah. But I call myself an ambassador. I'm an ambassador.
I just connect people.
Yeah, I'm a connector. And for me, connection is... Have you ever done those corny games where it's like, stand up and say a name, say a word that starts with the first letter of your name? It's always connector for me. I'm a connector. This is how I see life. If you told me you loved underwater basket weaving and 10 years ago I sat on a plane next to somebody, I will find them so I can introduce you, because I know no two people that love this thing. And I feel like, in a way, this is sort of one of the reasons I've gone this way professionally, is that connection is just making those connections is so cool.
Okay. So the need it feels for you is the need for connection.
The need to make the connection, to be, I think it's the engagement.
Or to be connected.
Well, not for me, it's to do it. It's the act of connecting. I had 2 conversations with people yesterday, completely out of the blue. And later that day, I have this list of things that I put little stars, like this is an action item. And it's to connect people. These aren't my clients. These aren't, this benefits me in zero way, but this is fun for me. So maybe we can explore what that is. I've never really thought anything other than it's like, this is Cheryl, this is what she does. I am a connector. You need to talk to somebody and I have a route to get to them, I will move mountains to do it, for sure.
Okay.
And what does that fulfill? It's fun. It feels really good. I feel like let me explore this more. I feel like I've really done good work, that maybe you wouldn't have met that person had it not been for me making this connection. And then to completely, in my brain, forget about it. And then 3 years later say, wow, look where they are now. I introduced those people. Things are happening. A business has been built, or something magical, a friendship has been developed. I have friends that got married. I said to my neighbor, go take surf lessons. They fell in love. They have a child now. And every time I see that child, I'm like, I introduced your parents. Like, I don't say that, but it's like, oh, this is so sweet. This feels good to
So
me.
would that feeling be to feel valued?
I think it's more the engagement part for me, because I don't ever feel lack of value. I know that I bring great value just being here on earth, being called to serve wherever I go.
That's quite unique, actually.
I'm lucky.
Salary.
So you said something about women, and I want to go on that before I forget.
And I don't even know how else to say this, but I've seen it before where like I'll send a resume over and they'll be like, oh, this is really good. I'd like to meet him. And it's like, oh, this is a woman. And then the tone somehow changes. And I've been like, oh, that's interesting. And it doesn't matter if it was a man or a woman on the other side. So I'm not saying that it's discriminatory or so on, but there's something in there that's like.
To the client or to you? Explain that.
So what happens is I'll send over the resume and some information and so on. They'll say, yes, we'd like to meet him or whatever. And I say, oh, this is a woman, what I mean? And then like the tone changes a little bit, like the value of this dropped a bit, like, oh.
Do you think it's their expectation, their bias? I mean,
it's a bias.
We talk about bias all the time.
This is a bias because I'm always having to help the women determine and negotiate their salaries.
But you're saying when you present a candidate to a client, you hear in their voice, and you are very sensitive to
Not just that. Sometimes it's like, exactly.
Yeah, you hear that.
Yeah, different.
I would hope, because you're independent.
Mm-hmm.
You're a rock star. In our world, this guy's a rock star. But you have the authority to say to them, by the way, I'd like to bring awareness to you. Did I hear a drop in tone? I would say that.
To me, I don't know if I do that so much. If this is the best candidate, especially in my opinion, then we'll just negotiate it. And then I'll make the case for why.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But what I do notice is that there is at times, and not always, right, more effort needed by women. Yeah. So that's why, like, for many years now, I've been considering, and I'm supposed to be doing it already, which actually by the time this goes, I may do it already. It's like women's groups.
Good.
Yeah.
Invite me.
Okay.
I'll help you.
Yeah.
Seriously, there can't be enough talk. And to your point, you said you find that more women need help. I agree.
Yeah.
This is why I was the president for the Organization of Women Leaders. This is why I sit on boards. This is why I'm a Workforce Development Councilwoman. This is why I sit behind microphones and talk, because I think I needed that role model when I was uncertain. When I gained certainty, I became talking. I just was able to talk. This was powerful for me to be able to say, not only do I advocate for myself, but in my free time, I will advocate for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always...
So you've noticed this too then?
100%.
Okay.
And this isn't just Hawaii. It's nationwide.
I would think it's worse in other areas.
It's actually worse here. So I have a
Really?
story.
Oh, okay.
I want to tell you a story. So
Okay.
I was sitting in a meeting, let's just say a meeting, and I was with a few of the state folks and a few of our friends, the civilians that, give time. By the way, there's 127 boards and commissions in the state of Hawaii. Please serve on one, because we're all volunteers. We're all doing this because we love our state and we want to give back. We were leaving a committee meeting, and it was hosted by this beautiful, magnificent contracting company, very popular here. And their president was on our board. Well, I'm in the foyer of this place, and I said to one of the state workers, like, come here. I noticed that I'm like the only woman at the table that speaks. This is my third meeting now. Should I shut up? And she was like, I hit her with cold water. She says, no, come on, let's go talk. So we go downstairs and we're walking. She's going back and I'm going back to my office. And she said, Cheryl, what's your fear? I said, I really want to fit in, but I feel uncomfortable. I've talked for the third time. And she said, this is why we chose you. She said, let me tell you a story. She said, you're raised Western, mainland. Squeaky wheel gets the grease. Women here, the quacking duck gets shot. And Evan, it was like all the breath in my lungs went away. I was like, And my immediate thought was exactly what I was told not to do when I moved to Hawaii, which was don't be that white woman wagging her finger saying, I know how to fix this. But my immediate thought was, I need to help these women become an advocate for themselves, right? I've since learned that Cheryl's way is not the best way. This is my way. This works really well for me. I'm 100% comfortable in what I do in my advocacy.
You mean Cheryl's way for someone else is not necessarily the best way, but Cheryl's way for Cheryl is the best way.
Cheryl's way for Cheryl's way. So in my immediate reaction to that was, oh my gosh, I have to help these women become more outspoken or advocate or whatever I was high glossing this. About a week later, I sat on a DEI committee. Would you please sub for the Asian American BRG group lead that is not available? And I thought, I can stop. Like, do you want me to run the Zoom call or the Teams call? What do you want me to do? I'm a little unfamiliar. I've never actually even been in this group. So here I am, Caucasian lady, sitting in this Asian American BRG, and I'm supposed to lead it. So I'm like, okay, I'll moderate it, right? And the one of the co-hosts said, do you have a story? I brought up the quacking duck story, and it really resonated. But what it made me realize, I really wasn't at the point where I was like, it's not my way. This startled me to know that there are women that just sit there and don't, because they've been trained or acculturated or enculturated or, their environment tells them not to. Well, it's kind of silly for me to think that wouldn't happen. That happens everywhere. But I left that thinking, I need to fix it. And through that meeting, I was like, no, I need to understand why they do that. Maybe do it a little bit myself and realize that they're very effective, even though they don't do things my style. So it's a long story to say that this was a big growth moment and through a really uncomfortable situation. Had I not been faced with that, I think I probably would have been, I need to fix this. In the back of my head, I need to fix this. And fighting that, because I'm not here to fix things. I'm here to show up, be myself, offer my talents, connect people, which is my fun thing to do, and provide value that way. That's really it. Not fix people. But it really did sit in the back of my mind like, I need to show these women how to speak up. Like, it was crazy. And I think of it now, and I want to say I've moved away from it, that I'm comfortable. And this was during COVID, by the way, during our lockdowns. So everything was online. I didn't really see people. I didn't really even go. I think my groceries were being delivered. We were still washing our groceries. My neighbors were like, do you want some wipes for your groceries? Like, we were going through that whole distancing thing. I didn't have anybody to really be my mirror and reflect back. Oh, that's an interesting thought, Cheryl. So it took a little bit longer than I think it would have normally, for sure.
Did you find out the source of why the duck gets shot?
I can
or
assume.
Why the belief is there?
Have you heard that before?
The one I hear typically is like the nail that sticks out that gets hammered. It's like a Japanese term over here.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, I've heard that one too. So when I tell that story, everyone comes up with their own anecdotes. I've heard that one. I've heard a couple other. I don't recall them right now. But yeah, the quacking duck gets shot. And I think because there's a gun and there's an animal involved, it's visceral. It's like, and I think, again, when we look at cultures, I was not raised in a culture that you were raised in, and nobody said that in my household. I can draw parallels, though. So we each have something that we can say. Mine was children are to be seen and not heard. That's
common here, too.
Is it?
Yeah.
Be quiet.
Yeah.
Speak when spoken to. And unlearning that is a lifetime.
Yeah, because it's basically saying you're not worthy of being seen.
Exactly. When my niece was born and I sent my sister, I'd gone to a wonderful gay pride parade in West Hollywood because it was right there where I lived. I lived in Los Angeles for many years. And it said children should be seen and believed. And it was like a onesie, a toddler onesie. And I thought, well, that's so cool that somebody actually hand printed that. And to this day, she still has it. She saved it because it's true. We grew up with the, when it's right. And I don't know, at what point one day you wake up and you're allowed to speak or be heard? Or did your parents ask you, Evan, what do you think? How many times can you recall your parents saying, what do you think?
Normally in the principal's office
Yes. Why did you do that?
or something along that lines, right?
I learned yesterday that why is a garbage word, that how and what are the kinder, more inquisitive ways that we can probe into somebody. Why did you do that? Rather than, how did you come to that? Or what was the genesis behind that? It makes you, when you put
That's the tone, though. That's different.
two,
So your tones were different because if
How
I
can-
switch the tones on that in the body language, it would be completely opposite.
like, what did you do?
Yeah.
How did you do that?
Because the why is actually really, really important. To me, the why is really important.
Well, the why.
Because it shows,
Yes.
it shows some background history on when you say the quacking duck gets shot.
Why? Yeah.
Why
Why
does it get shot? You know what I mean? Like,
because it's not supposed to be, because it's loud and noisy. You don't want to be loud and noisy. I mean, you
the
can
why
go.
is super actually important. I ask that a lot. One word and you get a lot.
Okay. Try me out. Ask me a why.
I've done it earlier too. So here's the why.
Yes.
Okay. Or actually, I don't know if it's even a why, but the one thing that stood out to me is that there's kind of a lot of advocacy going on, right? Your strategy is advocacy a lot of times, right? Like to speak, I'm going to speak up. I will speak up for myself. You will notice me.
Right.
And on the other flip side of that, you said that you're raised with children should be seen and not heard. Mm-hmm. So you aren't heard. And then that's an interesting one.
Yeah.
To me.
It's a dichotomy for sure.
It makes sense, right? Because if you, young Cheryl, you should be seen and not heard. And young Cheryl needs to be seen and heard.
And she
Then you
was.
learn how to voice yourself because that need is strong enough. And that's the strategy that fills that need. When I understand that and the why behind that, I understand Cheryl much greater. So that's kind of the piece that I'm talking about with is the why for this woman. Because if you've heard some of the past shows, then I love the quote by Resma Menachem, which is trauma decontextualized in a people looks like culture. So decontextualized means like over time you forget about it, right? Like it could be in any culture. You'd have war, you'd have famines, you have colonization. Over here, you have colonization. Your land is taken from you. Your language, your culture. Over time and generations, people forget a lot of that, right? And then that becomes culture, right? So trauma decontextualized
You're right.
in a people looks like culture.
Yep.
So trauma decontextualized in a family looks like family traits.
Right.
Trauma decontextualized in a person looks like your personality. And then I added this one myself, which is trauma decontextualized in a company looks like your company culture.
It's true.
You go into a
It's
company.
never the one that's on the website. Sorry to talk over
Right?
you.
And that is the why. So as we're kind of probing here and dots are kind of being connected, it makes a lot of sense to me who Cheryl Cross is sitting across from me now and the why you do certain things or why you show up certain ways in certain situations.
I'm so glad you brought that up because people have asked me, why do you do this work? And it's like, because it's just the way I am. It's just what I do. I was thinking the other day about this, and I'll share this with you. Maybe you can help me. As a kid, as you're a child, you're growing up under this, be seen and not heard. And this was not said in the household, of course. It was just, it was like a universal belief.
Yeah. It's the culture.
Yes, it's a culture. So it's not like on the wall.
This is the
when you walk
expectation.
into the Cross household. It wasn't
It's in the VA,
in the VA. Exactly.
right? It's in the relational space, in the
you.
space. It's in the hierarchy. It's in everything. It's young Cheryl. You're not valuable enough at this situation to be seen and heard.
Well, it wasn't me specifically. It was all the children.
All of them.
Yeah.
But
it was
when
just
you're a child,
that
it's
the
you.
adults had the floor.
Right. But as a child,
Yeah.
you're not thinking about it's them, this and that. A child, it just becomes this is me. I am not able to. I am not.
Well,
seen.
I'll tell you, I was an early advocate, and this sounds braggadocious. It's not. I remember the first time I felt, because a therapist asked me this very recently, what is it that motivates you to give back so much? And I don't see that giving back as an issue, but what is it? So that you understand what's propelling you, we need to really understand the kernel behind this. So I went on this deep dive and I thought, what is the earliest memory I can think of advocating for someone? And it was on Lewis E. Rowe Elementary School playground, new elementary school in Las Vegas. We were standing, it was desert because they hadn't even put down playground yet. And kids, we must have been in, well, 1st through 5th grade, holding hands and doing some sort of morning exercise, on the playground. I just remember the playground. And seeing across from me, Barbara Goldberg, may she rest in peace, nobody would hold her hands. And I immediately was like, you could kind of feel the unease. You talk about feeling the unease in the kids. And the teacher looked at her and looked at the kids and said, okay, everyone hold. They wouldn't do it. So I took the people I was holding hands with and went, beep, hold each other's hands. And I darted over there and I held her hand. I didn't know Barbara. She was, I don't remember her before this, but we became fast friends. Well, I learned she was born with webbed hands and had several surgeries. She had also had a cleft palate and had a visible scar, but she really hid her hands. And I don't know that we're running around the playground. I'm hanging out with everybody. That one situation, I didn't stand there and go, I should go over there. I just did it. Mm-hmm. It was like, so what propelled me? I still am trying to uncover that. What propelled me to go over there? And to stand there and say, why aren't you guys doing this? In my body language.
This is where the question why would come in.
So why is that? And I say, I can answer that right now. That's my strength. That's come on, you want to do this too? I'm doing this. It's like was it Huck Finn or Tom Sawyer that painted the fence? Now, I'm not trying to fool anybody into being an advocate, but when you model advocacy because that's what you do, you're doing the right thing, right? While there was this culture of children be seen and not heard, there was another culture of do more, be better, give back. And I think that even though we were taught to be very quiet and not be obnoxious, or, as we say now, advocate for ourselves or speak up, there was also this higher gloss of if you have, you give. We are entitled. We knew that. We were staunch middle class, very comfortable white folk. And even in a mostly staunch middle class white folk environment, we realized we had more. So you do more. And you don't talk about it. And you're humble. And you're kind. So the minute you
Otherwise, you're what?
Otherwise, no repercussions. It's just striving.
Are you sure there's no repercussions?
Yeah, I think so. Because
if you're the only one that doesn't do that in an area that expects it, there's no repercussion socially.
But I'm never the only one.
But if you were.
But I'm not.
What if you were?
I'd find new people.
What if someone
that
was?
Are?
Yeah. So you're saying,
I'm never in a situation where I'm the only one doing the good work.
Right. But what I'm saying is that in that where you said it's expected, if somebody didn't do it, they don't belong.
True. This is the family culture. That's another culture.
If you don't belong as a child, you're about ready to die.
I never felt that if it was a do or die or it was just everything we strove for. And thank you for bringing that up. It makes me think of my dad because this was the saying that was on his dresser. Like we had important things in the office, but on his dresser. So when he took his stuff out of his pockets when he got home from work, he saw this every day. And it was sort of his...
What did it say?
Do more, be better, give back.
Okay.
Just 3 lines. And it was just this little plaque that I don't know where he got it, but he may have gotten it back before I was even born. But I remember it being there. It was never said. It was never, you need to do more. You need to be... It was just, that was there. And being a kid... I was like, it resonated with me.
As a child at that point, that statement that's on there on a scale of 0 to 10, with 10 being the highest, how important did you view that was to your father?
Oh, 100%. Or it wouldn't be
10,
there.
Right?
Yeah. 10, sorry.
10.
100%.
And if you went against it?
It wasn't that we were being valued by that. It was, this is what we strive for, And
if you didn't?
There were no repercussions. I can't tell you
I'm not saying you're going to get hit or something like that as a result of it, but How old were you when you were talking about that?
So I'm trying to think. I must have been, how old are you in first grade?
Six.
You have little kids.
6. So
my son's 26 now. I don't
Right.
remember. So I was probably, this was like first, second, third grade that I had that, situation with the hands, holding hands. And no, I go back to that and talk to me more about that, because maybe we're on two different tangents.
So
on
what
this.
happens, Sarah, is 6 years old, especially at 6 years old or even younger. The most important thing for us is to have the attachment to our parents or caregivers.
Right.
Because
sure.
without them, we're
dead.
going to die.
Yeah.
Right? If that's 10 out of 10, that statement of I must help others or whatever it was on there.
Do more, be better, give back.
Do more, be better, give back.
It's actually in the book.
That's 10 out of 10 important to my father, which means it's 10 out of 10 important for me to feel this to gain my father's approval. Or maybe not. But as a 6-year-old, you're calculating right now as an adult. I calculate as a 6-year-old.
Honestly,
to fit in.
So thank you. I'm on this journey right now,
Right.
trying to connect these dots, because,
You go against that. You go against everything that's important
that the company,
in your family.
that the family stands for. Well, for my dad. But I can't tell you that I had do more, be better, give back in my brain when I saw what was going on with Barbara Goldberg. I didn't.
But
And
it might have just been in your body.
Maybe. But again, does a 6-year-old know what do more means, or be better, or give back?
The 6-year-old would typically know what makes her father accept her more.
Yeah, I agree. But I think that really...
Is this line of questioning okay? Because I feel like I'm challenging it a little bit and so on.
This is
but
conversation
I don't know if
good.
it's appropriate. So you tell me if you want me to continue that or not.
If I don't want to answer something, I'll just say I'm not interested.
Okay.
No, this is good, because, again, a therapist asked me this recently, and there's got to be a reason that you do all this civic work. And it's like, is that a problem?
Why would it be a problem? Just because the way she brought it up?
He.
Or he. Okay, he. Oh, see? Interesting bias, right? And actually, that's an interesting one, because most therapists are women.
Yeah. Well, I have a great one if you need him.
Yeah.
Kaiser Permanente. But going back and figuring out the why as an adult, what motivated me as a child, I probably didn't know. And honestly, the more, and we can talk about this more, the more I learn about ADHD and how this sort of, not clouds, but how our brains work a little differently because of the dysregulation, because it's constantly searching for dopamine. And in order, we could talk about that. That's a whole other show. But I think, impulsivity runs into that. I was an impulsive kid. And I think I just felt like that was just my energy. People say, I have a great energy. You're like the Energizer Bunny. You've got so much great energy. I was that 100 times as a child. I was hyperactive. I still am. So as the ADHD, hyperactivity, I am the H instead of the inattentive. So I always, even as I learned about ADHD more, looked at that action as that was impulsive. It felt good. And boy, howdy, nobody said a word. And everybody grabbed hands, like the person on her other side. But it was that, and no one ever said I don't think a teacher even said anything. It's just like, okay, everyone's holding hands now. Let's go on with our day. Let's go pick up rocks or whatever we were doing in the playground. But I remember that so strongly, and because it also was a several-year friendship. But that's how I met her. And in my mind, if I show up, I don't think I had this thought as a kid, but if I show up and think Barbara's cool, which she was funny, she was really quiet, and I played with her, more people will play with her too. But that wasn't my intent. It was just nobody would hold her hand. And I felt badly. And I didn't know why. And quite frankly, when I held her hand, it was leathery because of the surgery she'd had. And as an adult, if I were to see this as an adult, I'd be like, you can talk to the parents to explain, let's write a note to the other parents to explain that Barbara's had a lot of surgeries. How would you approach this and maybe make it easier so this situation doesn't happen for someone else, which I think is a big reason why we do what we do in HR or consulting or things like that. Mm-hmm. So keep asking the whys.
I'm hearing this 6-year-old Cheryl talking, and then I'm hearing adult Cheryl analyzing,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they're not saying the same things. This is like a very interesting kind of piece for
Oh,
me.
it's a dichotomy, right? You're seeing Cheryl the analyst.
It's
and
not really a dichotomy. What's happening is I'm
and
watching the
and
adult Cheryl protect in the way that adult Cheryl kind of protects.
I
And the young Cheryl had something to say in terms of just how she wants to express.
okay.
That's the only thing I've seen.
Well, I'll continue to think on that. I don't see it that
It's
way.
not really a thinking, though, on this
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
I don't. I'll continue to explore that because again, this is a journey I'm on
You mean now or later? What are you talking about? Right now?
today,
Okay.
right this minute from now on.
Okay.
Again, this is something that I'm trying to figure out, and to the point where I'm just now like I haven't uncovered anything
So tell
that's
me, like,
bad.
I'm trying to figure
so
out
I
what.
don't necessarily need to
Yeah.
continue on. I'm working on other things, kind of thing. Like yes, when this glimmer, I call them glimmers, when these things come up, I now have I'm open to receiving it. Where before, I would probably not be because we wouldn't have this conversation. I would not been able to draw these parallels to be like, oh, that might have something to do with this. Let's chew on this for a minute. Let's explore that.
Yeah.
So thank you. You've opened a little door or a portal so that I can kind of check it out.
So what I hear then is bad coming up a lot, right? This wasn't bad. So the judgment is typically good, bad, right, wrong, right? Good, bad, right, wrong is the moral judgment. We want to be good. We want to be right, because if we're bad or we're wrong, now something's wrong with me. And then if something is wrong with me and somebody feels that way, that judgment on that, that's what we refer to as shame, right?
True.
So the interesting thing when I hear that is like, it's not bad. Even when I'm hearing this and so on, I'm not even going right, wrong, good, bad at all. But I heard it, right? Like, so some part is afraid of a judgment in there. And it's not a judgment. Let's just say it's a child at 4 years old, okay? Or 3 years old, whatever years old. The unspoken and spoken is children should be seen and not heard. And the parameters around that are you're not really valued as much as everybody else. So as a young kid that age, the only thing that they can internalize is something's wrong with me. And I don't want to feel something's wrong with me.
Because their life is very black and white, pedantic, right? There's not a lot
There's
of
no
gray.
prefront. There's no, like, their brain's not even formed.
Right.
They can't even talk for the most part. I mean, I have 4 kids. My youngest is now 9.5 or so. Now we actually kind of talking. But up until now, really, I mean, she can talk, but not, I mean, she's not really having fully formed understandings of the world and the parameters and social situations and so on. That's not happening.
No, how could
Right?
she? Yeah.
So as a 2 or 3 year old, the only thing you can know is something is wrong. If something is wrong, it's my fault. And I'm bad. Because everything is me. They're not thinking globally. And a lot of it is just what is being felt in the body. And I'm noticing for you too that you're pretty highly sensitive. You feel stuff. You just kind of know that,
Yeah.
which typically means that's how you've been your whole life.
Yes.
Right? So you're feeling these
100%.
things over and over. And then the story we tell ourselves is to justify of what's going on. But that story comes later. So if that feeling is there, and then the protective response is to now, I don't want to feel this. In order for me not to feel this, I can advocate for myself. I can do things good for other people because I see that now I appreciate the relationship that I need, the connection that I need, and so on. That is how we will conduct ourselves because it works.
It does. And you bring up a great point, and something I learned through ADHD coaching is the people-pleasing aspect. That it's common amongst adults who were not diagnosed until they were adults, like I was. I was 38 when I was diagnosed. I ignored it, completely ignored it. I was treating my son. I was helping my son. I went into UCLA Brain Research Institute in Los Angeles.
With Dan Siegel?
Maybe he was there, but I worked with research assistants because it was a grant to help children, but they were looking for familial connections. Yeah. So my son's 26. He was 8. We did all this testing, and here, I got this free help because I was going to be tested too. When the researcher came out, Evan, she was so excited. She was shaking. Her paper was shaking. She's like, yes, we think that you are too. Would you be open to, could we help my son? Like, yes. Okay. So they gave me this long list of pros and cons, and the research they were doing, it was this huge packet, but there was one sheet, and I bring this up for a reason, that had the pros and the cons and what they were seeing, not just in me, but this population of adult, undiagnosed, mostly women, parents of ADHD children. And they were calling it ADD at that time. So they hadn't changed it. So I looked at that and I was like, good, bad. We're going to fold that in half. And I'm going to stick the good on my wall. And I kept that good list up for years. And I worked on that template. And it was like years later that I kept that piece of paper because it was important to me. It's like I found out a bit about myself, that the qualities, a bit like reading astrology, like you're an Aries and you're from the planet Mars and you're full of fire and all this. It literally was a list like that. It was generalizations. You're very independent, a lot of entrepreneurs, blah, blah, blah. So this was the direction I was heading, and it felt right to keep looking at that list, like my positive chicken soup affirmations. The other side of that list, I didn't look at that for years, Evan. When I unearthed it to move here to Hawaii, I turned it around and went, and it was like, oh, this is the stuff I'm not addressing. I maybe should have opened it up and looked at both of them and worked on both at the same time. But I think one of the things that you brought up to me was, and this is something, the people-pleasing, people say, oh, you must be nice because someone said to me, was your father or mother an alcoholic? It's like, no. Well, they believe that children of alcoholics become people pleasers. So I was like, gosh, is somebody an alcoholic in my family? So you start second guessing and going back and going, what is this? Why does someone bring this up? Should I explore this more? Like the backside of that list for me was like, oh, foggy brain, loss of time, emotional dysregulation, super sensitive. I can feel what you're thinking, just like you can feel what I'm thinking. Psychologists say that's hypervigilance. That's a form of, having to read between the lines as a kid. And most likely you came from a traumatic childhood.
Wouldn't hypervigilance be more like just can't turn it off?
I think
versus your
depends.
overfeeling?
Funny, I use that word all the time. But I use it because I'm also working in a population with PTS, military. But for childhood trauma, hypervigilance means you're never really turning off and you're always on guard.
Yep.
Like putting your back to a door. That's a big deal for somebody who's hypervigilant. They need to see what's going on.
Yep.
And to be constantly scanning the environment for threat.
Because it's always dangerous.
Yeah. So you'll see this in people whose prefrontal, let's just say their amygdala is broken or their prefrontal cortex is damaged. They're very predatory. Their eye movements, it's constant scanning because their system's not regulated or they're not working well.
You ever studied Gabor Mate, Dr. Gabor
I
Mate?
love him.
Right?
He speaks a lot about ADHD.
Yeah.
And I just love him. He's such a gentle, kind spirit. Now my phone's sitting next to me. It'll probably throw up more things on my YouTube because it heard me. But I love him, yes.
Yeah, because he talks about ADHD as being just childhood trauma.
Yes.
Because you can't run, you can't fight, then you'll freeze or you'll dissociate.
Yep.
Or you'll
It makes
fawn,
perfect
which
sense.
is the same thing as people-pleasing, or faint.
Right.
Right? And in the short term, it's helpful. Yeah, fawning, they call it. Yeah. It's in the short term, it's helpful. But in the long term, especially in school or so on, it's not.
Yeah.
Right? So.
So going back to school, so let's go back to the playground, because I think this is where, if we want to draw a parallel between why do you give so much to childhood, I think, one of the things that I've learned this population has is we were told we were dumb because we really didn't get it on a lot of levels. And growing up, I think one of the words, the do more, be better. You were told that
by who?
Well, nobody ever said you're dumb to me. But the thought, remember you were saying the child thinks I'm wrong. It's my fault. Well, somebody keeps saying, why don't you understand this? Why aren't you understanding what I'm saying? Why can't you do the instructions? Why can't you do what the other kids are doing?
You mean you remember that from when you were younger?
Oh, 100%.
Okay.
So rather than, well, now, thank goodness, they're a little more aware of children who aren't following the rules because they don't get it. They don't understand it. They're different learners. But I didn't have that. So the thing was, so we talk about do more, be better, give back. Why aren't you just trying harder? So that was the message to me, is if you just tried harder, because my parents saw this kid who was not like their other kid, but was very much like one of my parents, but she was masking the whole time, that if she just tried a little harder, it's like, you have no idea how hard I'm trying. I couldn't express that because guess what? You're to be seen and not heard. So thank you. You just would talk about connections. That just try harder. That was my father's message to me. You'd learn your multiplication tables if you just tried harder. Here, take these flashcards and go sit in your room. You're going to tell an ADHD kid to sit quietly and do anything that isn't 100% consuming. Well, I'm pretty sure I can do well with numbers now. But at the time, I have something called, I think it's called dyscalculia. I was not diagnosed as that. This is just my armchair psychology. But reading about some of the parallels, I was not dyslexic. Reading was very easy for me. But numbers, if it wasn't for Sesame Street, so a perfect example, I do remember this, standing in front of a class or with a group of kids, and we were looking at numbers. And the teacher said, Cheryl, what number is this? And I said, it's purple and it smells like brownies. And the group just cracked up. And this is the joke in ADHD, is that we're funny because we're being serious, but it's so ridiculous when it comes out of our mouths. Well, now I know as an adult that this was Sesame Street, that the number, whatever that was, 12, was probably purple and someone was baking brownies. And that was my imprint of that. So for me to remember that, even though I didn't know what it was and I couldn't really recall it, I could recall the other things. Now, thank God for psychologists who can scaffold around that and help children. But at the time, I just thought I wasn't trying hard enough. And that is, I mean, at 56 years old, I have not met one adult who says that they're ADHD that has not had that experience, that's what teachers and parents came to them with was, if you just tried a little harder. It's like, and then the grief of when you realize how hard you're trying, it's exhausting.
You mean the feeling of like hopeless and helpless?
Yeah. And to think that that's stupidity, you know?
So when you have that, then what's the belief that gets set at that time?
Honestly, I was just revving so high on doing things like that Barbara Goldberg thing. Like I was just constantly in motion.
What's the belief under it, though, that causes the pain?
You know, I'm wondering if it has something to do with the hyperactivity, because
what's the belief under that?
Go sit with those feelings of shame or feeling inadequate.
Yeah.
Maybe that has something to do with the high level of energy that my body is producing. My mother died last year, and in talking through like the grief with my sister, because there's only two of us, and she's older and had a different experience with my mother because the family divorce. And I had a stepmother. So I was raised in a different family unit. But her experiences of our mother, not being able to be on time for things and just complete hyperfocus on things. And just as a child, when a parent's hyperfocused, you don't exist. I purposefully did this for a while.
So you're neglected?
Neglect, yeah, absolutely. So at grocery stores, maybe you had this where you grew up. But there was an intercom, and I loved doing this after a while. I learned to do this because sometimes my mother would just lose me. There was one time I wandered away from her, and somebody came up to me, and I kind of recall this and said, "Little girl, where's your mom?" And I turned around because I was probably hyper-focused too, and off in La La Land. I didn't know. So they got on the intercom and said, "There's a little girl named Cheryl. Can her mom go?" And I remember getting the intercom, hello, broadcasting career, and saying, "My name is Cheryl." Well, here's my mother going, "I couldn't find you." You know, it took 3 seconds for her to walk to the front of the store. But then it became a game for me. And I'd purposefully I'd see when she'd hyperfocus, and I'd go somewhere, and I'd find the lady with the intercom so she could say my name. So she could say my name on the intercom. It became sort of a game.
Was it also because when the lady said your name on the intercom, you felt heard or seen?
No.
Because she announced it?
No.
She saw you?
It just got my mother's attention. It was like, when it was almost like I don't want to say it was a game. So someone else brought this up to me, like, were you playing tricks on your mother? I was like, no, I thought this was fun. I really did think it was fun. I never got in trouble for it. Nobody ever said, please stop doing that.
So this was a way that you could get your mother's attention without getting in trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. It was pretty effective. I mean, I remember, and I was little. And so this becomes, and again, you remember your childhood through the stories that are told. This is a funny Thanksgiving dinner table story. Cheryl wanting to hear her name on the intercom kind of thing. And my mother even said one time, she said, I kind of was on to you after the third or fourth time that you were waiting for me. So she said, one time I pretended. And I was like, okay, well, I'll see you in a second or something. She said something to me, and that was my cue. Phew! And she said, and I watched you, man. You were on a little reconnaissance, looking for someone. Hi, I lost my mom. And she came up behind me and said, I'm right here, and took my hand. And I didn't get to hear my name on the intercom. And I remember hearing or thinking, oh, that didn't work. So I don't think I did it anymore. But for a while there, it was fun game for sure. And what's the why behind it? My memories of that are really still kind of like mischievous and fun. And that was a lot of what I was as a kid. And maybe a little
How
as
old
an
were you?
adult. Little, like just maybe like 3, 4, 5 years old. Again, numbers, years,
Okay.
time.
So you're talking about you're only barely learning how to talk by then.
I was talking.
No, like what kind of conversation you're having with a 3-year-old right now? You're going to talk to a 3-year-old. You're having a full conversation?
No, not a full conversation.
So
but
what I'm saying is that the development of a 3-year-old at that point, they can say words and so on, have maybe somewhat of an idea, but not a lot. It's not a lot.
Not as an adult.
They're not necessarily pre-verbal, but they're still very young developed, right?
True.
So the concept of anything is going to be very, very, very simple.
Yes.
Typically.
And simple understanding because they don't have a lot of experience either.
So
right?
if you take that into account and not coming at it from your perspective now as an adult, as a 3-year-old that has a very limited view of anything as well as a very limited vocabulary, then if you look at that if I'm spoken and my name is announced onto the loudspeaker, my mother will pay attention to me.
Yeah, I still don't. I appreciate you doing that. I don't think that was really it. It was really the game.
When you say that right now, who's answering me?
No, both of us, because it really was fun. My feeling of disappointment when I realized I couldn't do that anymore was like, one less fun thing to do. Yeah, and it probably was powered, Evan, by getting my mother's attention, but not cognitively. Like, again, you're 3, 5, however old I was little. Let's just say I was little.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cheryl going and getting her name said on the intercom. So the story is always told this way. Like we always knew that Cheryl would end up in broadcasting or whatever because she was always looking for the microphone. But you're right. I knew my mother could check out, and I felt like, not that I had to do something, but I'd take this opportunity to go and get her attention. And it's not parentified. I know that's a term in psychology.
You're talking about a parentified child?
Yeah. I'm not taking care of her, but I was definitely taking care of myself.
Yeah. I mean, by getting your name out there, that's how you get seen by your mom. Yeah. I mean, that is...
So would we call that early advocacy? Advocating for yourself? Taking care of your own needs?
It would just kind of be trying to build attachment as possible, as however it's possible.
I'm not, thank you. I don't know the clinical terms.
No, I mean, that's what I don't know. I don't know if that's the actual clinical term either on it, but
But we're talking about in simple, advocacy, like
in simple terms.
What motivates someone to do what they do? What motivates someone to be an advocate?
Well, think about this, or not even, it's not even thinking. When Barbara did not have her hand held and you were in school, can you imagine what emotion you felt right there?
So shock. I was like, why is nobody holding me?
And what else?
That's it. Like, go. Just here. We're going to fix this.
But shock doesn't typically move.
But
shock is just something like,
let's do this.
Shock.
Yeah.
that's the reaction, right? That's like the story you're telling yourself and then the reaction after it. But there's an emotion, there's a feeling that you feel before that.
So high sense of justice, as I've been told this, you have a very high sense of justice. Do good, do right, do better,
That's
whatever.
still a judgment though.
Right.
That's
but I'm
a
saying
thought.
that this was a motivator for a lot of what I did and
Yeah,
do.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that, what do we call that? Someone said it the other day and it was a beautiful way to say it. But yeah, I wouldn't get in trouble if I did that. I wouldn't feel shame if I didn't do it.
What emotion was she feeling?
I would imagine she's feeling ostracized, like, what's wrong with me? Now I know why. I mean, I didn't know at the time. And to be honest with you, Evan, if I knew, I'd probably be even more like staunch to be like, what are you guys doing? Come on, we don't treat people this way.
If she feels that, then you're sensitive, you feel that. And then the other stuff comes.
What other stuff?
The sense of this is not right. I'm going to now go over there and so on, because that's after the feelings.
Yeah.
The interesting thing on this one is that the accessing of the actual like emotion and feeling for you is hard. It's inaccessible or something, right? You are open and wanting to go to do, and you're having a very tough time.
I don't know.
That's just,
that propelling, that impulsivity that really ruled a lot of my younger life. And a lot of kids, not just ADHD kids, but we're impulsive. We do dumb stuff. That's the thing I remember. The physical sensation of being propelled to go, like, go and do this thing.
So on a scale of like 0 to 10, 10's high, would you say that your childhood was traumatic?
I think that there was
like
trauma for sure. Well, I've been asked this question before and I kind of don't know how to answer it. So thank you for being a coach.
Just consciously.
1 to 5, it depends.
1 to 10.
Oh, 1
0
to 10. 4.
So low.
5.
Low.
Is that low?
I mean, right? I mean, you would say kind of.
Could we create a life where there's no childhood trauma? I don't know.
That would be so tough, I would think. But if you're looking, I mean, I'm not doing an ACE score here, right? So are you familiar with ACEs?
I've been asked this question before, and I've said things like, which part of my childhood? And they're like, and all the therapists are like,
yeah. So this is common. Yeah. This is common.
Is that called compartmentalizing? There we go.
I mean, I'm not a clinical therapist, so I am familiar with certain terms and so on, but this is common, right? So if you look at the way that your disposition leans towards, which is what's positive in this, how can I feel good in this, what is the bright side and so on of this, the same way that you take that thing and you fold it and you do not see it,
exactly,
is the exact same thing about this, which is what part of my childhood, because I'm willing to look at the part that is in my mind pretty good. I am not willing to look at the other part. That might not be conscious. Right. But you can tell by the way that you answer that that's what is there. So here's the thing. You ever heard of Carl Jung? Carl Jung, right? So Carl Jung, I love his saying where it says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it runs your life and you'll call it fate. So what we're seeing right now, in my own perspective, I could be wrong, right? Like, is that the unconscious things that are running everything are completely running the show. Like, you are more than willing to go and look at stuff. You are very willing, like I am trying. And there are certain areas of this that your system is just not allowing you to go to. Or
maybe I've just done it.
Could be, but I mean,
and it's finished.
It could be.
If there's no issue to be there. And the reason I say what part is because I do feel like I did have I was raised by 2 different sets of parents, really. Yeah. And it was a bit fragmented. So what part? Was it when my parents were married? Yeah. My biological parents? Was it during the divorce when I was raised by my mother? Was it when my father and stepmother had me? So
that's a lot of analyzing and so on.
3 different.
So it's super hard to do it that way because like the meaning do you feel like you have a really strong kind of like meaning making piece of yourself? Like you're constantly making meaning of things and evaluating stuff and analyzing things? Probably, yeah. That is a strong sign of somebody typically that has a traumatic childhood. So trauma is not what happens to you. It's what happens in you as a result of what happens to you. What happens to you is traumatic, but that is done when it's done. And typically that gets, like you get in a car accident, it's traumatic. You typically physically heal from it fairly, within months or so on. The trauma that is the wounds that are in there that have not healed yet could be like, now I'm afraid to drive.
Yes.
Now I am looking over my shoulder all the time. I have a weird twitch. I'm muscle guarding. I'm doing things, right? That's only the things that you notice. So when you think about that, and you look at they'll call it like big T and little T traumas. Big T traumas are all the, your leg got fully damaged or you're abused or something like that. The little T ones are like neglect, shame, things like that. The little T ones that go long, long time, which are typically developmental, right? Those ones are much more insidious. The big T ones are typically the ones where we'll have a PTSD around, right? Some instance that we're stuck, we can't access it or so on, like a military, right? Military one, they're in war, they're in something, it's stuck and it's around, it's so painful, but they can't get near it, right? And it's one event, and it's one event that they can't escape from. The little T stuff is just pervasive.
Right.
That's the stuff typically that is very harder to resolve because it's pervasive. And if you look at the military that typically has PTSD, if you do the ACE scores, which is adverse childhood experiences, and looking at what their childhood trauma is, there's a good percentage that have already coming into the military with highly traumatized backgrounds.
Interesting.
Anyways, I don't know. I don't want to beat a dead horse on this one, but it's very interesting. I'm like, you have done really well about, making the personal accommodations needed in order to really succeed in life. And whether you're not, you need to even access any of the other stuff. Who knows? I don't know. That'd be for you.
Right.
I do notice that in this setting, those are not accessible
Interesting.
to us right now.
Wow. Well, thank you for bringing
I don't know.
me to this awareness.
You tell me or not. I don't know.
I've done a lot of work, and I've been and I don't mind going back. So when you and I first originally talked, you're like, this is a really different interview, Cheryl. This isn't your regular. I'm like, bring it. I'm not afraid of those things. I am who I am because of my experiences.
Yeah.
A new thing I'm working on, and maybe this has to do with it, is you mentioned big T, little T, and the only other person I know that has said that is a woman. She and her husband were leaders in the field, and I just heard her on a podcast again. Anyway, her and her husband were known in Southern California, and I lived there, where they would bring people in and help them kind of become clearer on what they thought they saw and their beliefs. And just to give a really down and dirty version, I don't do this justice, but we believe as children, if something happened to us, we saw it. So I'll give you an example that she gave. She had a client who was a Harvard professor, and maybe you can help me unravel this. So the Harvard professor grew up with the belief that he was stupid, and they brought it back to a situation where his father, who was also highly educated and very smart, would pop him on the back of the head and say, "Genius." So that situation is where he went to and thinking he wasn't smart, because that showed him, his father said, "You're not really that smart. Keep thinking harder," or whatever that father meant at that time. So when he was able to look at that as, my dad was popping me on the back of the head and saying that for his own reasons, doesn't mean I'm dumb. Look at me. I'm a Harvard professor. I teach people. So this belief is just not necessary anymore. And I think that's the work that they do, is really detaching from these beliefs that we hold that are kind of clogging up the pipes of our lives. So I've been working a lot on that. Like, did I see it? What are my beliefs attached to that? So I'm in that mode of analyzing a lot. And I appreciate you bringing this stuff up, because with the exception of a therapist, nobody else, and maybe my son and two of my best friends, nobody ever really kind of feeds me back this stuff. So thank you.
So what you're saying is that for that person, they've kind of narrowed it down to a limiting belief that has caused the pain.
That's it.
So they're going back there and reframing that belief.
Yes.
That's exactly what
is
typically
that called? Is that applied psychology?
No, I mean, that's it. That's where every healing model goes to for the most part.
Yeah.
It goes to the limiting belief. The core belief, because it's typically that core belief that is what causes the pain. So you might refer to it as a burden, right? And if the belief doesn't cause pain, then that's typically not an issue. But the ones that cause pain are like that. Like, I am bad. Something's wrong with me.
Yeah.
I am stupid.
Yeah.
Therefore, and somebody is judging me, right? Which is probably created
Sure.
a massive amount of energy for that person to become a Harvard professor, because you have to have a massive amount of inertia to pull that off. You know what I mean? Like, absolutely. And that's exactly why when we were going with ours, that's kind of where I was going with it, was, can we access what that actual limiting belief is at the earliest stage?
Right.
And then, then take a look at it as a adult. Because when it's stuck in there, it's stuck as a child. Let me give you an example of this. There's a model called NET, and the guy who kind of created it, he was telling a story. And I like this story. He had done a process with this in a group, and the man was talking about how his father hated him, and because he was at a camping thing as a young child, and his father just threw him on the ground and started beating him. So my father hated me, right? So they cleared that through this model. They cleared it, and then he took a break. During the break, another man came up to the guy and says, "Hey, I'm his brother, and I just want to tell you, I was at that same exact camping event, and what happened was my brother got too close to the fire. His shirt caught on fire. So my dad jumped out and pushed him on the ground and was rolling him on the ground to put the fire out."
Oof.
So how somebody internalizes what actually happens is completely unique to them. And when it's overwhelming in their system and they know they can't process it through, it gets stuck, and that is the trauma. That's the wound. That is what gets stuck there invisibly.
Got it.
That's what we're talking. That's what I'm referring to.
Got it. Thank you for bringing that full circle. So I am going through that. And again, I just heard her work again yesterday. I was like, ooh, I like that. I'm going to go get that book. I'm going to see if I can unearth some other stuff. You bringing up the fact that, yeah, I am very analytical, and I am sitting in front of a microphone. So, and I am a professional. I'm going to be higher gloss, although I think I'm a lot more vulnerable here because you're a friend and this is a beautiful, safe space. And I get what you're going for in the podcast. You're bringing some of my favorite people to the show. I loved watching Sarah and her talking about not only what she's gone through, but what she's learned from it. It was beautiful. And so again, thank you for what you're doing. This is really valuable and very different. And as podcasts go, and there's a squillion of them, I know, I just went to PodFest in Orlando. You have to be there next year. You know, we're really niching down. You're doing something very different. I haven't seen this yet. So thanks.
It is different. Actually, this one went a bit more like kind of into this area than normal. So we'll see how that kind of plays itself out.
I'm excited. You know, again, I don't have off-limit stuff. I know there's a fabulous magnet. I must have given it to somebody. It's like, be a woman with no regrets and live a life that's full and clear your crap out, you know, so that you can be free and clear. And again, going back to that thing, to help others or to be that. I don't necessarily need to be actively mentoring or sponsoring or championing for other women or men or those who don't identify as either. It just human beings. I just need to do it for myself because I want to go to bed at night feeling peace. And when I depart this world, I want to know that the work I did was valuable for sure.
So is there anything wrong with that in your mind?
No.
So why even dig into anything of why that is how you are?
Well, I still want to know more. I mean, I think I'm the most fascinating person in the world. Is that narcissism? I don't know.
No.
You know,
narcissism is typically like a strong protection against feeling shame.
Well, there you go. So no, I guess not. So let's go back to ADHD. When I learned more about it during pandemic, when I really struggled with it, because, and again, so I was reevaluated for my healthcare insurance and for the company to get a calendaring app. So I needed to come out and they're like, well, we need documentation that says you have ADHD. I'm like, really? So I went to my healthcare provider and I'm so glad it happened, even though I joke about it. And I teach this for HR, you know, hire me as a consultant and I'll make sure that your neurodiversity is on track. But this gave me the opportunity to sort of understand the why. Learning that these things, getting into the community of other ADHDers or neurodiverse women whatever it is, if you're level 1 autism and ADHD or AD, what do they call it? ADHD or AUDHD. They've combined them too. And this is happening a lot too. So is it, how are we requalifying ourselves, understanding? When my mother died, getting back to that, my sister and I are talking about situations, and now I have a bit of a template to go, she was undiagnosed ADHD. My sister is a physician, so I can talk to her about the stuff that I'm learning about myself that I see in her, and it gives me more compassion.
So you're saying your mother was or your sister was?
My mother.
And what about your sister?
No, I don't think so. I mean, she doesn't feel that she is, but I don't see these things in her. But, as my sister and I heal and grieve her loss and talk about some of our situations, I can say, and we just went on a trip recently, like, I know now why mother was late. Her time continuum was different. And I struggle with this too, and Facebook, Instagram, even LinkedIn, and the incredible people in Hawaii who are advocating for DEI and disability in the workplaces, they're all uncovering these things. And it's talked about. Where before, even when I got that list, Evan, it was shameful. I was not going to tell people I had ADHD. I was treating my son. No way.
Yeah.
Because I'm not a spaz. I'm not this. What did I think? And this was so many years ago. And to think where the continuum is gone. So yeah, keep asking these questions because this is what helps other people heal. It's helped me tremendously. These groups, sometimes I get tired of them, but the groups that I find, the communities I find, even if they're little short, 50-second clips about ADHD, what do people with ADHD do? Part 36 is like, oh, I resonate with that. I'm not alone. It's not just me, right? It's not just the effort I'm putting into my life. It is a thing that I have to create a workaround for. And I have successfully, or maybe I wouldn't be sitting here with you. I'd be stuck in a different way.
I kind of feel like, especially for entrepreneurs, and I don't know if I read this somewhere or saw a video or so on, where it shows people like Richard Branson, like really high level.
Dyslexic. He's dyslexic.
Yeah, they with some type of neurodivergency. And
Elon Musk is another one. Bill Gates.
When you think about it, like, especially to survive in school, if you're neurodiverse, you typically have to have somebody help you. Mm-hmm. So we get really good, or some of us get very good at getting others to help us.
Were you?
And being happy about it. I'm super good at getting people to help me.
But were you as a kid?
Getting people to help me?
Yes. Were you diagnosed?
Absolutely.
May I ask when you were diagnosed?
Kindergarten.
Oh, see, there you are.
Yeah, I was on Ritalin and then Ritalin again and so on. Oof. I had my own seat outside the class. Oh. Right? So when my parents would come for parent-teacher conference, they go, hi, Evan. And my parents were like, how did the groundskeeper, the security, how do they all know your name? Then they realized, oh, you have a seat outside of here. But you fast forward that to when I was getting demerits and then detention of some in high school, and you could work it off.
Yeah.
These are all my friends for a long time. Yeah. So I would just bring them a plate lunch, and I'm done. They just go. Yeah. You know what I mean? Even till today, I can go and my friends that are still there, I can park anywhere on campus. I mean, I can.
What school did you go to?
Punahou School.
Okay.
So you know what I mean? So it's. Yeah, I got very good at getting people to help me and so on, which means that now later on in life,
it's like the workaround.
That's why we're better at running things. One, I need support in different areas to fill in the gaps, but I'm used to being in charge.
Well, you are, and you have always been since I've known you, an out-of-the-box thinker. And I think that
depends which box.
Well, you may not sit in a box. You're sitting outside. You sit outside the box. But being an out-of-the-box thinker, I'm a connector. And I've been told over and over through ADHD friends or, you see things very differently, even than they do. Maybe they are too neurodiverse. A dear friend of mine, Mary Ramsey, says to me, I love telling you things because your purview on them or the way you see a solution is just, how did you get there? She said, it's fascinating to me. It's like, well, thank you. And I know she doesn't say this to other people because that's not who she is. She's not a bullshitter. So I think to myself, I know it's a gift and I 100% own it. as a child, you're very lucky to have had a diagnosis because I was not. My son, we
I
caught
don't
him
know
late
about that.
too, and he's much younger than you. But
Because as a child, when you it's not like you're getting accommodations back then and so on. You just get labeled.
well, you get labeled and you get drugged. And
Yeah. So I'm not sure how that's super helpful, but
your situation,
yeah.
again, it's most likely it's genetic in a lot of families. It's also, situational. You were talking about that, or compounded by
I
situation.
mean, unless it is just trauma, and then your trauma is passed down.
But you have the opportunity to help your children
Oh, 100%. Because
of your situation.
I mean, typically it's the stress level of the mother that affects a lot of the development of the child. It's how much stress is in
utero.
the mother. No,
Yeah.
period.
Well,
Period. Because think about this.
well, then you can talk about epigenetics too. I mean,
That too, but if your mom does not have the capacity to hold the space when you need it emotionally and so
100%.
on,
I see what you're saying.
then how are you stopping
It's nature
anything?
versus nurture. So the nurture side has to be on track too.
If they can't be the support that's needed in that area and you don't have support in other areas, stress level of the mother. I mean, so I forget which study it was, but stress level of the mother has a huge effect on
Absolutely.
that child's
Well,
development.
you can even see it in animals. So I have a dog. His name is JD, just dog. And JD's only lived here about a year. He was my dog, and then he lived with my father, and then we rehomed him back when my father passed away. So JD is new to the neighborhood, about a year in, and I don't go walking anybody else's dog. So this is new for me. I'm meeting people. And I've noticed that the dog's demeanor is directly correlated to the owner.
Yeah.
100%. And now I don't have a PhD in behavioral science, but that is my armchair psychology view of the world, is through their dogs. If I don't like their dog, if my dog does not like your dog, I probably won't really resonate with you either, because that dog is really modeling the behavior of the owner. They're an extension, the leash. And I thought, that's really, So I'm meeting my neighbors this way. Yeah. And a lot of them are wonderful, and their dogs are cool too. So our children, our animals, they're our receptors. They're receptors to our energy and our behavior. So my son is the great-grandson of 2 Holocaust survivors.
Oh.
And he has done a bit of research, and his father and I'm still very close to my in-laws. They helped me raise him, and his father too, even though we were divorced. But knowing the Holocaust background, when I got pregnant, I went to my mother-in-law, who was a daughter of 2 Holocaust survivors, and I said, how do I handle this? How can I best represent the history of our families, the trauma, and how can I not protect him, but, I see it a little bit differently because I sit on a different perch. I see the hate, the anti-Semitism, which is on fire right now, both sides. So how do I handle this the best way for everybody and for him? How do I become his advocate, right? Not knowing anything other than what I read in history books and the stories that, obviously. One had just died when I met the dad, my ex-husband, and she was still alive until about 3 or 4 years ago. So her stories lived on, and she would tell them once in a while. She had the tattoo. And by the way, let's honor her. Her name was Sala Langer. Her maiden name was Weitzman. So the Weitzman family were killed. They came from Poland, went to, I believe, the ghetto. She was interned in Auschwitz after a move, but her whole family was killed. The husband, Stephen Schrulich, which is Hebrew, Langer, escaped on the train to, they believe, Dachau. So he jumped out of the train, broke his shoulder, I think, and was part of a movement called the Jewish Federation, which is still in today. So this is big stuff, right? My family doesn't have anything like that, really, at all. So I was sensitive to that. And as we've sort of dug into the honor of this, and representing and being advocates for, or it's not even like standing up and punching people in the face. It's just like, actually, no, let's redirect you. Maybe you could learn about it this way. Learning that the trauma is in the DNA. How can you not have produced children that would have generational trauma? So is it generational trauma that is in the DNA, or is it because this person had such traumatic things happen to her or him? I mean, he went through it too. And, is it passed down through the mother, my ex-husband, and now my son? Like, is it genetic? Is it situational? Is it the nature versus the nurture? So,
have you ever heard of Brian Diaz? He's a doctor he used to be at Emory University. Now the lab is at UCLA, I believe.
Oh, really? No.
So it's in this exact area on how generational trauma is passed in through the DNA. Yeah. And one of the experiments that they do is in rats. So they'll take rats and then they'll shock them. The male rats, they'll shock them, so they have an adverse reaction, and then they'll have them smell a scent. It's like, I think it's a cherry blossom scent or something. So that eventually what you can do is you can just have them smell the scent, and then they'll have the same reaction, right? Then what they'll do is they'll mate these rats, and then they'll separate them. And then when the mothers give birth to the baby rats, eventually they'll separate them, I think. So the baby rats have never met the father. And then when they become mature, they'll test them with the smell. And then guess what happens?
Same response.
They're more adverse to it than the parent was.
Yep.
So they would never have met the parent. They don't know why, but they'll have that reaction. That type of research is being done right now.
Thank you for sharing that. I love UCLA. I'm a big fan. And when I lived in Los Angeles, I was there constantly. But in this culture of Jewish Los Angeles folks that I was involved with during my marriage, and there were therapists that only worked with children of survivors. That was their whole practice.
Yeah, they're probably full.
And grandchildren of survivors. So my thought is this, and this is probably something because you're tuning into this more, is I believe, so let's say I inherited ADHD from my mother, who I believe inherited it from one of her parents, most likely her dad, because he has a lot of the same characteristics, impulsivity, not great in school, being told constantly he was a mess up, and running away at 14, becoming a farm worker, didn't finish high school, which the boys didn't back then.
Sounds like trauma to me.
Yeah, I mean, generational trauma. But so that embedded generational trauma, which I'm pretty sure his parents, they were poor. Both my parents came from very poor upbringings, hardworking, lower class labor. My mother was a cotton picker before she went to school and after she got home. And because she was a girl, she got to go to school because the boys usually stayed home. And her family was different. They all went to school. But a lot of the families around them did not. So the schools, if you see pictures.
You mean when she was younger?
Yeah.
But when she was your parent, then she was middle class.
Yes. So she went to college and met my dad, and they created a life and moved far away from the farms and the oil fields of Texas. But think about this, Evan, and help me out with this, because this is something I've been thinking about a lot. So we have this impact into the cells in the DNA of our bodies, which is then passed on to our children. What about ADHD? Is it a response? Is this brain dysregulation, this neurobiology that we all kind of carry, this different brain structure? Is it because of somebody being hypervigilant? Is it someone that's way back in our DNA or in our ancestry line was traumatized, and this has been inherited, and it's showing up here in the way that we process and the way that we access dopamine? What are your thoughts on that? I'm curious.
I feel like it's the trauma that gets passed down. Like when I look at a family or so on, and then someone will say, oh, alcoholism runs in that family, or that's a family of athletes, or that, you know what I mean? It's the family trait, right? It's that decontextualized trauma in there. So to me, it's the trauma runs through the family, and the alcohol happens to be the numbing of choice. Yeah. Right?
Because it could be gambling, sex, drugs.
It could be anything.
Yeah. Addiction is addiction.
But if you're talking about ADHD, which is typically, you're impulsive, short-term memory is not so hot, those types of symptoms, and the brain is dysregulated, meaning that it cannot come back into that normal peak kind of range. It's too high, it's too low, right? I'd say neurofeedback. Neurofeedback is by far, to me, from anything I've ever done, the most effective for ADHD. Mm-hmm. Better than TMS to me, because I don't know if you're familiar with TMS or transcranial magnetic stimulation. It's mostly for treatment-resistant depression. That's what the label used by the FDA is for. I'd say for ADHD, though, the fastest, easiest way with no feel it to heal it, you don't have to dig through all your past, you don't have to talk about painful stuff, is neurofeedback, which is basically like PT for the brain.
Oh, I love it. I've done it. Oh, yeah.
Okay. So my wife is a neurofeedback practitioner also,
good to
along
know.
with like many other things. But yeah,
Good to know.
our family's strong believers in neurofeedback for
It
that.
works.
Yeah.
It works. Yeah, Bryce Britton in Los Angeles is a practitioner. She was somebody that was a mentor of mine for years. And I'm fortunate that she turned me on to this prior to my diagnosis. And it has served me so well. It is, talk about fast reward. That to me, like we talk about recruiting being a fast reward business and why we do it, because it feels good to do something so quickly and see the results. Neurofeedback was that for me 100%. 100%.
How many sessions did you do?
Oh, this was probably about a year, a little over a year.
So dozens of them at least.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Not like one or two.
Yeah.
No,
okay.
no. I mean, I wouldn't go weekly, but maybe once every 2 weeks or a month.
And then what did you notice?
Oh, clarity. Like, again, was I diagnosed at this time? I can't remember if I was. This was right around the time that I was learning at 38. I learned that I was ADHD. So yes, I had already been diagnosed because my son was older than 8. But I think to myself, gosh, on this journey to try and figure out how to work on that list, not the one I was not looking at, the one that was against the wall, but how to make that better. I saw it as, boy, I felt like a streamlined jet, just like everything was working. It was perfect. When you drink too much caffeine and you have that moment of productivity, that eureka moment, that's what it felt like. And to me, it was like, oh, I don't need caffeine. I don't need any stimulants for this. This is working.
Did it last?
No, it didn't last. It lasted until around the next session. But what I worked with her and what she's brilliant at is, look, we're training your system. This isn't going to happen overnight. You're not going to get 3 sessions. Okay. You're going to try. It's like eating an appetizer. You really want a meal and you want to get that hunger going away. So this is what we did. I think it was around a year. We went like weekly, and then waiting to see how long. When she said, when it subsides, call me and I'll work you in. So within a day or two of it, not me kind of feeling a little, we'd do it again. And then I noticed the times got longer. And that was the goal, right? We were training my brain and my body to really do this on its own in a way, and to start reprogramming and reprocessing. So it got to the point, I remember she gave me a little present. I still have it. And she said, you're done. I said, what do you mean I'm done? I love this. I don't want to. She's like, no, you went 6 weeks. And to me, 6 weeks is, if you need to come see me, come see me. But 6 weeks that's the goal. 6 weeks between appointments. You're good. You can do this. You can jumpstart your brain. Your body knows this now after however many sessions. And that was, to me, like, oh, I do have the keys to the car. I own the car now. Okay, I can do this.
And then how are you now?
I'm good. Let me back that up. So I've had a couple pitfalls. The parents' death, both my parents' death. So big events tend to kind of, but again, you're learning that Cheryl is analytical. So is that my brain? Is that something, or is that grief? And I just don't know grief because my parents died in their 90s. And aside from some close relatives that died when I was little, I've not experienced grief or loss until this last 3 years. So big events, yeah, I get a little off kilter, but for the most part, I can still access that feeling. And I'm so grateful. So yes, this is turning into one long promotion for feedback, but it truly, truly works. I think some people are afraid of it, or they think it's hokey pokey or airy-fairy baloney. It's not. But, you've got to find what works for you. The other thing that works well for me is vitamins. So the correct vitamins for me, especially the B vitamins. I was talking to my...
You did a blood test first or what?
I've had my biome done. I've had blood testing. Trust me, if there's a thing out there that I can do, except for getting a full body MRI scan, I haven't done that one. But I'm really interested in the why. What's motivating something? Why is this I learned early as a child, my mother's a nurse, was a nurse, she passed. But it's not disease, it's dis-ease. So your body is telling you that something's off. Let's figure out what that is. cure for everything, Evan, was bran muffins, which is a long way to say, like, you need to be pooping. So if we were sick, we had to eat a bran muffin. To this day, I cannot eat bran muffins. Thank God they aren't sold anymore. I don't see them in the stores. But bran flex, we had so much fiber in my house growing up. But it really was the cure to everything is clearing whatever it is in the body first. And then if it's something serious, we'll take it to the next level. But it usually wasn't. It was just kind of clearing the pipes kind of thing. That was my mother's thought.
So which vitamins are you taking?
I take all the minerals and Bs. So
In a multi or something, or what?
So they have the efficacy threshold for me. So I'll go about a year and then they'll stop working. And then I have to reset. And that's an awful 4 weeks. And I usually try a new product for 6 months. If it doesn't really work as well as the old one, I can go back and it's like it's for the first time. So I've used Ritual. They're usually, I know what I need and I'm ordering it in a pack. So it's easy, but I usually just go to GNC. I take D every day. I do have a good multivitamin. I've run out, so I have to find a new one. And all the Bs. The B vitamins are very important for me, and I take those in a drink in the morning. So I make sure the D, honestly, I ran out of D and forgot that I was supposed to take it every day, was feeling a little fatigued. Who knew that little tiny pill of that little D oil would make such a difference? We live in Hawaii. I get D by sitting by a window. It's coming through the sunshine. But not taking that pill because my body was used to it, I was like, why am I so tired? Oh, it's the D vitamin. Darn. So, yeah.
Is there anything that we left out that you feel like we should cover?
Are you kidding? I don't want to leave. This is so awesome. I feel like we're like one. No, I mean, I asked this on my podcast. I don't want to flip it because I'm the podcaster too. But thank you for this. I've already thanked you. And I usually say, what can I do to support you? And that's not my podcast. So
if I answered that, I would ask you that, what are your main takeaways from today?
Oh, you helped me bring a lot of questions so that I can like chew on them. Questions to the table that maybe there's answers that I haven't found yet.
Like which ones?
Well, you brought up a good one about, that whole situation with Barbara. What were you feeling? And I've always just categorized it as, my impulsiveness to go over there and do the right thing. It was doing the right thing. Where that came from, I still don't know. Was it a bad thing? No, I got a great friend. So some things maybe not need to be explored, but really look at them in a different way. And then thank you for closing the loop on, genius, that, being hit over the head and having the perspective. I think it's really important to have perspective. So my takeaways were...
You mean how that got trapped in his system and it was inaccurate?
The fire.
Yeah, okay.
He didn't remember the fire.
Yeah.
He didn't remember the scary part. He saw it from his feeling of being attacked.
Yeah. That's what got stuck.
And that's such a beautiful example because the intent of the father was never felt. The safety, the protection. And it also wasn't probably talked about. Like, are you okay? No, I'm afraid. Giving children the space to say what they feel, to process, so that it isn't like stuck in them for 40 years. That to me as a parent is very important. And then I'll share this one last anecdote. When I was raising my son, jokingly, I would say, don't do that. I'll send you back to the little boy factory. And it was light-hearted, ha ha ha. Well, guess what? Came up in therapy with my son. Mom, when you told me when I was little that you were going to send me back to the little boy factory, I thought you were really going to send me back to the little boy factory. Like, there is no little boy. This is a fictional place. And then uncovering that is like, that's a horrible thing to say. That the things that we do and say, if there's no context or no explanation, they are hurtful. They are. And I catch myself doing it all the time. He just flew back into town on Valentine's Day. And I said something stupid last night. He's like, Mom, are you thinking about what you're saying? Like, he's 26. He couldn't say that when he was 6, So you're giving me a chance to kind of pull pull these memories up and talk about them, and I will definitely be chewing on them. Thank you so much. This is good radio.
Cool. Okay. Well, I just want to appreciate you and acknowledge you for coming on and spending this time with me, Cheryl.
Of course.
I know that you have been really open about, just going with the flow and not being afraid to explore, and all the help that you're doing, especially for these military veterans. And I was on one of the LinkedIn lives. I can definitely feel your support and care for just people in general.
Well,
I
thank
just wanted
you.
to acknowledge you for that.
You gave me a great saying. You said, you feel like a hope merchant. So, namaste. Thank you so much.
Thank you. If you resonate with Greater Good Radio, please join our community at www.greatergoodradio.com, where you can get access to exclusive content and offerings. Hope to see you soon.